was announced this afternoon that Singapore will increase the number of MPs in Parliament by 4, as well as do away with 6-member GRCs. If you take a look at the new electoral map, there will now be 14 SMCs and 17 GRCs. These are up from the current 13 SMCs and 16 GRCs. A new 4-member Sengkang GRC will be created. There will also be 4 new SMCs, Kebun Baru, Marymount, Punggol West and Yio Chu Kang. However, Fengshan, Punggol East and Sengkang West have been removed. Olivia is more with the Straits Times news editor Zakir Hussain.
Well, thanks, Dylan. So, Zakir, let's get right into it. Gone are the 6-member GRCs like Ang Mo Kio, Pasir Ris, Punggol, which are helmed by Prime Minister Lee Hsien Loong and Senior Minister Toh Chee Hian, respectively. So, what do you make of this downsizing? Why do away with these 6-member GRCs?
I think PM had signalled some years back in Parliament that the trend was towards smaller GRCs, and I think the Boundaries Committee probably took note of that. And I think there's a sense that maybe 6-man GRCs can be a bit unwieldy. You have 200 voters, with different, interests as well, being served by a large group of MPs. So I think the sort of more natural state of affairs would be these 4 or 5-man GRCs that would, let you achieve that mix of having multiracial representation and at the same time keep constituency sizes manageable. But there's also the intent of making the elections contestable, having enough SMCs so that, folks who do want to contest an election, the barriers to entry are low. And so you see one more SMC this time around. Right.
Well, you mentioned, I guess scaling down the GRCs, and of course now the biggest GRCs will have 5 members, like East Coast and West Coast GRCs will be expanded to have 5 MPs. Yep. Both these areas saw some of the closest contests between the PAP and the Workers' Party during the 2015 GE. So tell us more about the changes to these boundaries at East Coast and West Coast GRCs.
I think in East Coast in 2015 there was sort of an carving out of Fengshan SMC during the last election, and now it's sort of just been moved back in. Actually, to be fair, a lot of on the activity level, a lot of SMCs that are sited next to big GRCs tend to do a lot of activities together anyway. Makes sense. But I think Nix might say, well, it sort of makes it tougher for the opposition to contest in East Coast as well. And then you have Sengkang GRC, which merged several WP strongholds. Yep. WP held Punggol East briefly after winning it in the by-election in 2013. Sengkang West, it did okay. It contested there, but it got more support than it did elsewhere. And Sengkang is a fairly compact town, easy to campaign in. Some might say, well, that's I think many expect the Workers' Party to contest there, and some might say that might help lure them away from East Coast. West Coast was not, I think West Coast was contested by the Reform Party in the 2015 GE. Now you've got Dr. Tan Cheng Bok's new Progress Singapore Party wanting to set its sights there. Again, the barriers, moved up slightly. But I think, though, these will still probably see some contests in the coming polls.
Well, you mentioned the creation of a new GRC, Sengkang, which has more than 117,000 voters. Yeah. Wow. So which minister do you think will be helming this new GRC?
I'm not sure. There's a chance it might, not be helmed by a new minister. But you do have Minister Ng Chee Meng nearby. And Dr. Lam Pin Min, he's Senior Minister of State, right? He's been there, 2-3 terms now? First
East,
in Sengkang West. Sengkang West, right? So I think whether there's a full minister or not, you've got a strong lineup of folks anchoring it, I'd say.
Okay. Well, I guess this is the million-dollar question. What is the timeline until polling day now that the electoral boundaries have been announced?
Yeah. It's hard to say. I mean, there's a chance it could, even be held in June.
3 months from now?
Yeah, 3 months from now. But I'm inclined to think, I think you might see the polls come around sooner, as early as early April. I mean, Parliament could well be dissolved next week, right? And you see an early April poll. or you might see a poll in, say, mid-April. There's a weekend between Easter and the start of Ramadan that could be a nice window to call an election for.
In that case, are you surprised that, I guess, all of this, the ball starting to roll isn't later on in the year? Because it's very obvious that we're trying to battle COVID-19 at the moment. So we may not have the mental capacity to also, I guess, manage an election.
Yeah, but that's the same case, I think, in many other societies around the world as well. At least 7 or 8 places are, in the middle of election campaigns, or have just had or will have some form of election soon. There are examples of how they take on, extra precautions. So either you step down rallies and you have added checks. The new guidelines on social distancing were issued today.
Yeah.
I think there's still enough avenues for voters to sort of get to know the various candidates, hear what they stand for and their platforms. But at the same time, I think PM's message yesterday made clear that, it's hard to say how the situation will play out in the next few weeks or even months. There are signs it could get worse, and we've talked about the second stimulus package. I think what the government does want to seek is sort of a mandate, to maybe a mandate to kind of put out this package, and a mandate to kind of take some possibly tough measures that might be needed, right? As this COVID situation plays out.
Well, this was announced just a few hours after the multi-ministry task force.
That's right, yeah.
Introduced, more measures to ensure social distancing. So, like what you said, how can, I guess, political parties realistically do all their traditional campaigning, like walkabouts and rallies?
I think they might end up having to scale that down, right? I mean, you can still go around, visit markets, hawker centres. And if you want to take precautions, then don't shake hands,
Definitely not shake hands, yeah.
Apply sanitizer if you do, and so on.
Rallies? How about rallies?
Rallies, well, rallies, you could have sort of town hall style events, but then you've got to cap them to, 200, 250 participants. But begs the question, how effective, I mean, you could have rallies and, live stream them, right? Or you could have rallies in slightly different conditions, right? You could even say, if there was a rally at the stadium, have some form of social distancing, although it might seem a bit odd. And the same thing when you go to the polls, right?
Exactly.
Each polling station has about maybe 2,000 to 3,000 voters. But at the same time, there's sort of between 12 hours, 10 hours to cast your vote. You could perhaps stagger the timings. And as in previous years, I think you can easily manage the flow of voters coming into the polling stations. And I think we might hear more from the elections department on this as the election comes round.
All right. Thank you very much, Zakia. Very informative. That was news editor for the Straits Times, Zakia Hussain.